Hello, aspiring no-code developer. All right, so we're back on to the data structures, and today we're going to be tackling JSON. Now, before we jump into this, zoom on out. Let's head back up over here to our data structures. Why? Just running you why. Again, knowing how the data structures work will help you build quickly and eliminate frustration due to bugs. It'll also help you feel like more of a developer, because you can interact with these other true coders and know what they're talking about, especially when it comes to data. Then the solution, right, is I'm just going to teach you how data structures work, the core ones that exist, because those are the ones you're going to be using most consistently. And ideally, the result I'm looking for you in particular is that you recognize the different data types and you know how to use them. You save time and frustration because of that. And third, you feel confident that you are a builder, you are a developer in this space. You don't need to know how to code in order to develop. So we've tackled primitives, we've tackled dictionaries and lists, and now we're going to get into JSON and APIs. I'm going to be using SmartSuite and Flutterflow to show off both of these, just like I did with dictionaries and lists. So first things first is JSON. Now, why is JSON a thing, and what does JSON mean? Now, I'll be completely honest, I've kind of forgot what JSON means. Something to do with JavaScript object notation, I believe it is. Let's double check my wording there. JavaScript object notation. And maybe I should just written JSON, right? Got it. Let's go, guys. Yeah, you don't necessarily need to know what it stands for, but this is what it stands for. There we go. JavaScript object notation, if you're really curious. So why is JSON a thing? So when computers were created, friends, they had a problem. They needed to make them communicate with each other. And, every computer, when they were first being created, it's like they all had different communication schemes. They all had different ways of structuring their data. And so this is still a problem. You can dive really deep into this, into how computers represent data with the zeros and ones, and there's something called like endianness, but I won't dive into that. But basically, computers, when they were created, they immediately ran into this need that they needed to communicate. And it came about that JSON, JavaScript, kind of became the norm for developing websites and the ability to browse the internet and let these computers load up a web page using JavaScript and HTML. And that's why JSON is called JavaScript object notation. It became the de facto way to communicate data between computers over the Internet of Things. And so what JSON does is it provides a structure to the data that is being passed between the computers. And that is why it is incredibly important, because honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you, it forms the foundation of the internet as you probably know it. There are other data structures that exist as well, but JSON is the de facto one that most people go to. Pretty much every programming language will have a way to consume JSON data and deconstruct it into its values to let you access it appropriately. So it's the foundation of the internet. So understanding it and how it works, how it's structured, is important for building your application, because your application will most likely interact with the internet in some way. So this is why it's important. Because when computers came along, they were like, we need a data structure that lets us communicate effectively between computers. And thus JSON was born. So let's see what it looks like. And I had an example over here before I hopped over here. So this is an example of JSON. Let me move my face over to the right side here. This is an example of JSON. And I'll just tell you right now, JSON is a dictionary. You have a field, a column in your header, and it's got a name, right? And that name, that field, has a value. And in this case, the value is another dictionary. You can also see it's kind of wrapped in these brackets. This is just part of the syntax. The cool part about this is that honestly, you can use AI to generate pretty much most, if not all, of your JSON if you ever need to generate this. Most of the time, though, you will only need to know how to read this, which is why I'm showing it to you. I don't care that you know how to write JSON. Computers write it way better than us. So don't write it yourself unless you're me and I have to show you this example, which I actually had AI write most of this for me. So there's no reason for you to write JSON anymore because AI is there and computers can do it way better than you can. So this is an example of a JSON object. That's what it's called. It's a JSON object. And this might be an example of something that's returned from the Roast Me app that my brother and I built. Let's say we're trying to get a user and maybe their top 5 roasts or something like that. So we've got their email, we've got their display name, we've got their user ID, right? Their photo URL, their phone number, the time that this particular user was created, the number of tokens that they have, right? All of these fields are here. And you can see we're making use of all of our primitives. So that's why those were important to know as well, because look at this, we got a 50 in here. We have a Boolean, whether or not they're initialized. All of these other values are strings. This created time is a special string that lets us know the date and the time of the creation of this record. The phone number is another special string, right? This photo URL is a special string that points to somewhere on the internet where we can pull this image from. The email is another special string. So those primitives are immediately applied to almost every single field here. Then we have roasts, which is actually a list. And if you can see this, maybe I'll make it a little bigger, right? This is a square bracket, and this is a curly bracket. In JSON, curly brackets are used to denote an object, and square brackets are used to denote a list. And so in this context, we have a list of roasts, and if I were to copy this and paste it, then this would still be fully valid JSON. Now, JSON has to follow this structure with the brackets and the fields and the dictionary structure that we've talked about previously, because that's how it's consumed. If we go back to this, right, computers need a very specific structure, a very clear way of communicating, otherwise they can't understand each other. This is pretty true and similar for us speaking the same language. If I'm speaking English, you need to understand my vocabulary, you need to understand my grammar. So you could see those two things as playing a role here. There's a grammar associated with JSON that's important that you follow. Otherwise, the computer won't understand it and it'll throw an error. In the same way that if I start to mix up my language and throw my verb in front of my noun or my adjective, or after my noun or my adjective like the French do, then, things start to not make a whole lot of sense in the English language. So the structure of this is highly important so that the computer can understand it, pass the information between other computers. So we're using every single one of the data types and structures that we learned about up until this point in this piece of JSON right here. I think the only one we don't have is a double, which would be like 50.5, but my tokens are integers, and so I don't want to have a 0.5 there, so it would just be 50. Now, this is the power of JSON, and this is just one example of JSON in action. So to show you now just another example of it in the real world, I'm going to hop over to Smart Suite and show you it there. So I've got this ability to, let's say, update a record. This is an example of an API. There's a lot here. I don't really care to show you this yet. We'll talk about that later. But what I really want you to look at is this response. This should look surprisingly familiar to this. It's got those brackets, it's got the field names. The colors might be different. These are orange. We've got our strings, record 1. We've got descriptions, We have another field here, and it's got an email. So our response, whenever we query information from Smart Suite, is in JSON. That's how it works. So JSON is ubiquitous, it is prevalent, it is a necessity to understand as you get into the no-code space. Like I said, you don't need to know how to write it, you just need to know how to read it. That's about it. So, hopefully you are seeing why JSON is super important. It enables computers to communicate each other through a structured language. You've seen an example twice over on how it is working in, or just what it looks like, and then an example in a live application that I'm currently using, my NoCode Software Selector, that actually accepts information from you so that I can make improvements on my NoCode Software Selector app. That's what that Smart Suite solution is for. So there you have it. We have JSON and how it works. Let's fetching go. Now, if you are a aspiring no-code developer and you really want to dive into the world of no-code and start building a dream app, right? If you're aspiring, you've got an idea, you've got a dream, you've got something you want to create, and you want to be part of it, then the best place to start is with my NoCode Software Selector, and the link will be in the description of this video below. Thank you so much for joining me today.